Welcome back to another homeschool break room live. Before we get started, first, we are going to be chatting today about homeschooling high school with more than textbooks or beyond the textbooks. Um, and I am joined, obviously, you can see I've got a guest with me today. I'm going to introduce her in a minute, but before we do that, I want to say that this is the second to the last live in this season. Next week will be our last one. We'll take summer off and then watch for an announcement sometime in the fall, and we'll come back with another season of it. And today, you may know Heather. She's joined me before, and she is the creator of the geography programs that we've used for the past couple of years. So, Heather, why don't you introduce yourself?
Great. I'm Heather, and I run Fearless Faithful Mom. And like you said, Tricia, I have created middle school geography programs over the last few years that focus on cultural geography, which instead of standard geography, where you're focusing on things like textbook readings, tests, and memorizing maps, cultural geography focuses on teaching kids to understand other groups of people. Why do they think and do the things they think and do? What parts of history, what parts of their environment, what parts of their religious beliefs impact the way they act and how they see the world? And how can we see how much we're alike other people? How can we see how our differences can enhance our lives? And how have sometimes historically differences caused things like conflict and division in our world? Um, and I'm going to be bringing that into high school soon with history now. My oldest is now transitioned into high school, and so now we're transitioning into understanding focusing on the historical aspect of culture.
Yes, so excellent. I do have a video featuring her USA geography journey through the USA,
Journey through the USA.
journey through the USA, um, and I will have that link down below. I did not do a flip through of the world geography one, but it's a very similar layout, setup,
Yeah.
design. So if you check that out, you'll have an idea of both of them. The links to her products will definitely be down in the description bar as well. So, and link to her blog, Facebook, all of it down there. So, I'd love for you to check out what Heather has been doing, especially if you are an allergy family with lots of allergies, because Heather is quite proficient in cooking around allergies. um, so before we dig into it, Heather, my question that I ask all my guests, what's for dinner tonight?
For dinner tonight. You know what? It is hotter than the Dickens here right now. I mean, not
Oh,
probably compared to you guys, but we sort of jumped from winter to summer all of a sudden and had like 3 days of spring. So we decided to go baked potatoes and bacon because I do the baked potatoes in the Instant Pot so it doesn't heat up the house. Beautiful
yes.
thing. Another one of our blogger friends taught me. Um, and um, but then I'm actually I made mashed potatoes for my youngest. She had to get some dental work done today. So she said she hated the dental work, but she's excited for mashed potatoes. So I made dairy-free mashed potatoes, and we're also going to be making soon. My son is on the journey through the USA right now, and we are hitting the West Coast, and so we're making apple pie for Washington.
Oh,
And
yum
I mean,
yum.
apple pie, Dutch apple
Yeah.
pie is about as good as it gets, in my opinion.
Well, it's Heather's on the West Coast, here on the East Coast. Much later, we had and every plate we got a box this week because we got back from vacation, and so it was fantastic coming home Monday and having a box waiting for me. And so tonight was a creamy pasta and Italian sausage. I think my husband made it. I wasn't home. I didn't eat it actually yet, but that's what they had for dinner.
That sounds yummy.
So we don't get the boxes very often, but occasionally they are super helpful.
Yeah.
And um, I always like to have some meals already ready when we come home from vacation, so that
Always
I
good
don't one, we can get back to eating real food, but also so I don't have to go grocery shopping
Immediately
right
to the
away.
Mm-hmm.
So, pardon me. Okay, so Heather and I both are big fans of teaching with more than just textbooks. I had this idea when maybe Heather, maybe you did too, when we started homeschooling, when I pictured what high school looked like, that to me was going to be a time when you had to like buckle down and get serious, and that included textbooks and whatever. And then
Yeah.
I had Scantrons. I wish I had a Scantron machine in my house. And then I had high school. And I was like, no, that's not the way to do it. We used textbooks some in high school, but for the most part, they're just kind of boring.
Yeah.
And what I didn't appreciate about high school before we got here was how much it's just like this natural extension of elementary and middle school. And you spend all those years, seeking out interesting projects and catering to what books they like to read and all of that. You choose the math curriculum that works for their style. And why am I going to stop that at high school?
Yeah.
For some image of high school that I had.
This is what you're supposed to do, right?
Right. And I wanted to get away from that. And so we did. And Heather, your oldest is a freshman?
She is a freshman this year. It's hard to believe, but she is a freshman this year.
And with my daughter, my next kiddo, and I know Heather's got learning challenges in her family as well, that make choosing something beyond textbooks a great choice. So Heather, you want to...
Yeah, so so before I was a homeschooler, I was actually a classroom teacher. So in my mind, I had, and I worked at the secondary level. So I student taught with high school, and I had all these sort of ideas of what high school was supposed to be.
Yes.
And I think while it wasn't overtly said, we all knew that high school was on some level supposed to be boring, right? Because we all had to suffer through it, and they can too.
Yes.
And then I realized that maybe that's not the best way to look at it. If I had to suffer, I endured it. You can survive too. Is maybe not the lasting picture I want them to have of their, culmination of their schooling experience with me. I survived, and you'll survive too. And then as you were saying, we found over the last year that several of my kids are dealing with ADHD, and a lot of the sort of more traditional plans are not as all that ADHD friendly.
Mm-hmm.
And so we found that we had to, shuffle things around and wiggle. We went with my daughter. We decided, you know what? She was stressing at first, trying to fit all the subjects in at once. So we said, never mind. We'll do one subject at a time for a shorter period of time and do, 5 lessons a day and fit it all in. And then you finish science in a matter of a couple of months, and you move on to history, and you move on to this. And it was just, like you said, we've spent all this time working on projects and what do you find interesting? And then all of a sudden flip the switch to the opposite for high school.
Yeah. It makes no sense.
So now we realize that I love doing project-based learning. That's why I made the middle school curriculum so project-based.
Yeah. And, I shared this in my email list, or to my list last night, and I said that when before you're a parent, you have all these ideas of what parenting looks like and what your kids will look like, and not even in that like you're going to be the perfect parent kind of way, but you just have this idea of what it looks like to be a parent and to raise kids, and then you have one. Like, oh, that's not what works for our family.
And it all flies out the window.
It flies out the window, and you find what works for your kiddo as a baby and then as a toddler, and that keeps changing. And there's no point in parenting when all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is how it has to be now because you're age 10 or age whatever. And the same thing I found very much true about homeschooling. You know, at first I imagined that like kindergarten and preschool was fun, but then you got more serious, and then that didn't happen, and then middle school, and then maybe high school level. It's just we keep just adapting.
Yeah.
And
it fits more with real life. That's what I
yes,
tell people is most of us in our work life, whatever job you do, you're not sitting there reading a textbook and then taking a multiple choice test every day, like every month. That's not how real life works for most adults. So if
no,
school is meant to prepare them for real life, shouldn't we make school reflect what real life will be? And most of us we're having to learn in our jobs to pull information from various sources, books, internet, magazines,
mhm,
newspapers, TV, and then put it together in some sort of usable project, whether we're creating a product or we're making a campaign or whatever it is. And that's what work is. So let's make
and
school reflect that.
and to kind of go off of that, you're also learning to make projects or whatever it is you're working on in a way that works for you,
Yeah.
right? Like, and and high school can be the same way. You can find what works for your kiddo, and you adapt. If you go into most work environments, people may you can take 5 people who look like they're doing the same kind of project. And if you look at their process, it's going to be different in their
And
organization.
you go into a job because it's what fits you usually. If you
Yes.
are terrible with numbers and you hate math, you're probably not going to go into accounting. You
No.
know, you're going to go into a field that fits better with your skills and your interests and all of that. That's what we tend to
Absolutely.
do for careers. So high school going outside the textbook gets them to prepare for that and helps them to think about what are the things that I enjoy most?
Mhm.
What are the things that I don't enjoy the most? So I
Yes.
know what I want to pursue and what I want to avoid. Where are my skills at? Where can I best
Mhm.
utilize my own personal nature?
And those things that you don't like, how do you make them a little more enjoyable in
Yeah.
real life, right?
How do you
Like
adjust it to make it work?
an audiobook and earpods gets me through a lot of laundry and dishwashing and mopping
My favorite TV shows on repeat. That's what gets me
on
through all of those
repeat.
things.
Yes. And so even then, if you've got a subject that your kiddo doesn't like and it's not their strong suit, what can you do to adapt
Mhm.
to make it more enjoyable, even if it's not something they're ever going to love?
Yes, right. As I tell my
I'm
kids,
never going to love mopping, but I like
it's like
mopping with
cooking.
audiobooks a lot better than without it.
Sometimes we just have to sort of suck it up and do the things that we don't
Yeah.
enjoy very much. I don't enjoy scrubbing toilets. I don't enjoy doing dishes. None of these are things where I'm like filled with giddy excitement to do. But sometimes we just learn to push through and do the things that are necessary in life. And there's some of that that is part of homeschooling in the high school level, right? They have to learn to push through that I want this end result. I'm going to have to push through a little bit of the that I don't want to do to get to that end result.
Yeah, and I worried about this a little bit with high school, knowing that my daughter was going on to college. Like when you have little kids and they tell you, well, if you always hold them for a nap, they're never going to learn to sleep without you. Well, all 3 of my kids can sleep without me.
They do.
And so I hoped that would still be true that when she got to college, like even if writing looked different in high school, that when she went to college, I was hoping she'd still be able to take all of that and figure it out in college. And guess what? She did. Like all of
Right?
those, even
Miracle of
without
miracles, it worked.
exactly, even without a high school that was filled with textbooks, she was able to go to college filled with textbooks and figure it all out.
Yep.
So if you're watching and that's something you're concerned about, like how do you prepare them for college if you're not using textbooks in high school, well, you could still use them, but it doesn't have to be all it's about.
And you
And
can pick and
kids are
choose
smart.
subjects
They'll
you
just
use.
figure it out. I promise. They're
Like,
going
you
to
don't
figure it
have
out.
to, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing, like either I use textbooks for everything or I
Yes.
don't use them at all. Like, we use
Yes.
textbooks for math. We use Life of Fred
Mhm.
for math. We found that works well. I have a kid who is very strongly math averse but adores stories. He is a story child. And so we found that Life of Fred is a great choice for him because it embraces his love of story without feeling intimidating in the way that many math curriculums can for him. And he can still do math. He might fight me on it and he might be a little grumpy about it, but he can do it. And so he can function as he needs to as a grown-up. And so that's the textbook that we use, because I didn't feel like I was prepared to do math without any textbook access. And so you have to figure out your comfort zone. Oh, Tricia, you're muted.
Thank you, Heather. For math, that was one that we definitely used textbooks for. My daughter took live online classes. She used the textbooks. And then she took them at the community college textbooks. And that worked well for her. That was a very good way for her to learn math.
Mm-hmm.
My next kiddo, who's just finished freshman year, that is a terrible way for him to learn. And so we used Mr. D, video-based, self-paced. We're not doing the live classes, just the self-paced. And it's been a fabulous fit for him. We used Beast Academy when he was in elementary, and then the videos. And Mr. D's been really good because you get worksheets, which we actually put onto the iPad, so that because he can use the Apple Pencil is easier for him to use than a regular pencil, especially with mistakes. Just to clear the page. And that combination has been perfect for him. He has excelled in math as a high schooler. Again, one of those things that through elementary, I taught, we were hands-on with math, like we did it together. And people told me, well, how are they ever going to be able to do high school math without you? You know what? They figure it out.
Right? And I've come to accept that mine may not do high school math without me.
And
I thought the other day, wait a second, kids in public school aren't doing high school math without a teacher.
yeah,
They have a teacher teaching every lesson and coming and checking in and all of that. So that's not really any different.
right?
People just
How
different because you're the mom, but it's not any different than
exactly?
them having a teacher in a classroom who's reading them every lesson, who's giving them the lecture as opposed to reading them the lesson and all of that. So it's all about changing perspective for a lot of it.
So much is about perspective. So that's a little bit about some ideas with math, but let's move on to a subject like science. How can you how can we
Outside of the textbook, yeah. It's
clearly it's been a long day. How can we homeschool high school without?
So we are doing this year with my daughter for her freshman year has been doing something non-textbook based completely for science. And I've been ever so slowly putting this together for her. Bless her heart, she's been very patient with me. She really wanted to learn. She wanted to do biology, but she wasn't thrilled about a lot of the options out there.
Mm-hmm.
But she adores cats and dogs. She loves them, like with every fiber of her being. And so I thought, you know what? There's no reason why we can't do the same basic ideas that's covered in biology curriculum and just focus them on cats and dogs.
Mm-hmm.
Nature versus nurture, genetics, anatomy. It's all the same basic topics that you would get in a science class. But I'm going to be honest, it's a lot more interesting to learn the anatomy of a cat than it is anatomy of an earthworm. As it turns out, most people aren't all that excited about learning about earthworms and fruit flies. But if you take that same topic, life cycle, anatomy, behavior, and apply it to a little kitty cat, all of a sudden it's a lot more interesting than it was on a fruit fly.
Yeah.
So we've been doing that. And one of these days I will actually put it together as a proper curriculum and put it on my page, but that's going to be a slower one. But what I did was I pulled real actual books that are out there. Sorry, give me 1 second. I can grab a couple that we have right here. Like we've got the National Geographic complete, guide to pet health, behavior, and happiness. We've got the complete kitten care guide and things like that. And these are actual books, just like you would use in real life when you're working. If you're researching something, you wouldn't go to a textbook because nobody's going to go, oh, let me go to the local college and grab a textbook and then I'll get back to you. They're going to find articles. We found journal articles. We found blog articles. We found Answers in Genesis has a lot of fantastic articles on animals and on genetic studies in animals and all of those kinds of things. I was actually surprised to see how many fantastic articles there were on Answers in Genesis page. And pulling all that together to make a science that's something she's interested in. So you can take it. Is your child into does your child love to play in the garden outside? Design a botany course. Let them design a literal garden for your house. Even if you're in an apartment, they can design plant things and plant experiments. Are they into, cooking? Have you seen how much chemistry there's involved in cooking?
Speaking of those two, like we did from Guest Hollow for 8th grade, we did a botany that was all books, not textbooks. Books, library books, videos, experiments, etc. For next year, he's doing Guest Hollow's Chemistry in the Kitchen, which
turns out cooking is just like all chemistry and math. That's all it is.
Yeah, uses books like What Einstein Told Us Cook, Culinary Reactions.
Oh, I might have to look at that.
I've got a video about it.
Yeah.
Dr. Joe and What You Didn't Know. This is 177 fascinating questions about chemistry of everyday life. Taste. Why? The science of why food tastes good to us. Right? Like these kind of things.
And there's great non-book resources. If you watch America's Test Kitchen, that's great for a course like that. They really delve into the chemistry of why recipes work and why they don't. We had a fascinating one about how what music you play while eating impacts how things taste. And it's true. They did a blind taste test on a guy where they gave him gave him the same chocolate on several different plates, but played different music, and it tasted different to him depending on what music was playing.
Alton Brown.
Yes.
Of course.
Alton Brown, of course.
So there are so many ways that even in science, you can design a course that's fantastic. And if you don't want to design it yourself, there are lots of great options out there. For ready-made curriculum, Guest Hollow is quite good. Build Your Library is fantastic. We enjoyed that this year. We used them for Ben's 9th grade year. He did like prehistory, ancient history, and geology as his history and science, and learned so much beyond what I can comprehend, like since I wasn't reading it along with him. So there are definitely options out there for high school that don't require you to use the textbooks.
And really, like we said, it comes to a perspective shift of not doing specific subjects and curriculum styles because it's what you're supposed to do.
Yes.
There's no rules. We are free to pick what works best for our kids, whether it's in the style of learning, whether it's in the subject matter. Just because your kid wants to do biology doesn't mean it has to be regular biology. Just because they want to learn about chemistry doesn't mean it has to be this lab thing with beakers and stuff. There's chemistry in our everyday life. Just because they want to learn, math doesn't mean I told my kids, one of the things they're going to be required to do before they finish high school is we are going to do a class on like math of everyday living, about personal finance, about budgeting, about doing your taxes, that's math. It doesn't.
Mr. D even has let me make sure I give the right name of it, but he has a math course That is called it's a project-based consumer math.
Ooh. I'm hoping you post the link to that in the description.
I will absolutely
We wanna
post the
see
link.
that.
My middle kiddo at this point does not anticipate college. He would like to do something with a trade. What that looks like, we don't know. So I was reevaluating what high school math looks like for him because for my daughter, I knew she was going to college and I wanted to make sure that she was ready for whatever she chose to do.
Yeah.
With him, it's not. And so I needed to shift my focus on what he should do versus what I
What
think
he
high
should
school
do
math
versus
should look like. And when I came across that one, I was like, oh,
and that's
that
really such a great
that
thing
looks
for every
fantastic.
kid, whatever they choose in life. I think
Yeah.
it's great for every kid to take a consumer math course because we are all, whether we go to college, get a PhD, become a medical doctor, become a city sanitation worker, everybody is going to have to buy things. Everyone's going to have to sell things. Everyone's going to have to
Yes.
pay taxes. Everyone's going to have a budget.
Yes. And okay, so one of the skills I was like, really is check writing. Well, okay, I don't really think we need to talk about checks,
It
but
comes in handy sometimes. Mortgage
it's still good
payments.
to know.
Yeah.
Having a credit card. But then they also go into things like calories and body mass index
Yeah.
and nutrition and taxes and insurance and travel. And all of those are skills that involve math, but
Yeah.
that we don't
Think
think
of.
about doing. Um, Leslie shares that she's putting together a
Ooh,
year of military history,
that's
and I can't wait to
exciting.
pick her brain about it a bit because my
Yeah.
youngest would like to do military history in high school as well. So I can't
I
wait to
worked
see what
with a
she does.
teacher when I was a classroom teacher. I worked with a teacher who was teaching at fourth or fifth grade level. And she really had this project-based learning thing down, and she talked about her kids for every era they studied, they could pick what fascinated them, and that's one of the
Mhm.
things I'm doing with my high school curriculum is, what are you into?
Yeah,
There's something about that in history.
yeah,
Military, weaponry, fashion, art, food, everything has existed for all of
mhm,
time. Technology, when you think about the general thing, technology's
yeah,
always been there, it's just changed. Whatever you're into, that can be a focus. You can do a history course that's all about the world wars. It doesn't have to
yeah.
be all of history.
When my daughter did world history as a freshman, she really enjoys more modern history. So we did a world history of the 20th century.
That's next year's 20th century for us.
I mean, obviously, you could
There's
do
so
4 years
much,
of world history in 20th century and still
right?
not get it all done. But focusing that deep dive on it was really interesting.
That's exactly what we're doing
And
next year.
next year, Ben is doing Middle Ages. And if you want to pick my brain any, Heather, about what
Yeah.
some of the things we used, let me know. But with Ben, he's doing Middle Ages history next year. And he really loves plants. And so I thought, well, a fun add on for history would be to take a look at Middle Ages agriculture and growing
Yeah.
methods, and he will gobble that up
Oh, yeah.
for
What are
my
the farming practices? How are they different?
yeah,
And how are they the same in many
yeah.
ways as what we do now?
And for my daughter's his US history, she was 10th grade, she was really getting into expanding her musical tastes. And so I found a list of the 100 best songs of the 20th century the NPR put together. And they had articles to go along with
Yeah.
each song, either about the musician or the song's impact on history, which was especially big during like the civil rights.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and every week or every unit, she had to listen to songs, read some articles, and pick some songs that she wanted to share with me.
Yeah.
Whether it was something that she just thought was I would like or I would hate or whatever. And it was so fascinating to talk
So
about what those
fascinating.
songs
why did they stand
did in
out?
history. Right.
Yeah,
What makes them stand out in history, and how did historical events impact the music and the music impact those events? What a way to put history into real life.
yeah. That's one of the things we talk about in my high school curriculum that I'm designing is that how do world events impact history
Hmm.
and future? How do they impact the culture, and how does culture impact our perception of world events?
Yeah.
How do political, you know, issues, leaders, all of that impact culture and historical events, and how do those impact political leaders and issues? And for them to get to see how everything is interconnected,
Hmm.
I think it gives them a much broader understanding of the world than just reading a
Yes.
textbook would, where it's just a bunch of factual information and
Hmm.
but out of context. Getting it in that
Yeah.
greater context, like you said, the music and the civil rights movement. And how did these play off of each other? How did the movement impact the music? And how did the music influence people's choices in the
Yeah.
movement? And seeing how everything is connected really helps them understand why people made the decisions they made.
Hmm.
What were they thinking? Why sometimes we ask, what were they thinking? And
Yeah.
we get a lot of really great conversations about, like, why on earth would somebody do something like that? And,
Yeah.
well, here's some of the reasons why, historically and geographically and all of these things.
Okay, so Leslie's asking a practical question that I think I hadn't thought to talk about, but I think is really important because we are talking about all these different ways and hoping to inspire some of you guys
Yeah,
to think beyond it. But what does that actually look like as far as assessments, and how do you know what you're doing? Do you use narration projects? I know I'm going to let Heather talk in a minute because she does a lot of project-based learning, but one of the things that I've done with both of my kiddos is a lot of short writing. So after a video, write me 5 sentences, a short paragraph about what you learned, about something you found interesting, something you didn't like, whatever. I don't care. Just write me a paragraph.
right? Mhm.
Um, with the skills of, like, if you're telling me you don't like something, how are you going to communicate that well to me? I don't care if you liked the video or you didn't like the guy's outfit. Fine. Why? Can you communicate
You
that
back
in
it up with
a
something, yeah.
can you communicate that to me in a non-emotional, like, fact-based thing?
Yes,
Can
that's
you do
such an
that?
important skill that so many
Yes.
people lack.
Yes.
So many
Now,
people.
preferably, I wanted about the context of the material, but you know what? I don't care if you want to choose something else. But that writing often builds the skill of fluency writing, like getting your ideas quickly down from here to paper. My daughter said that was one of the best skills that she took to college, was that ability to quickly get things from here onto the keyboard. So we did a lot of that. My middle kiddo loves to chat. So many
Yep.
times throughout the day, he'll come and tell me about what he just read. And I can ask questions about, how does that connect with this or with that? How are you going to apply that? Like, just those, um, I hate to use the word generic, but those kind of generic questions that probe them to
Yeah.
think more and make connections. So for
It forces
him,
them
I
to
do a
really
lot of
back
that.
up their things with a reason.
Yes. Um, so in our family, a lot of short writing and narration, verbal discussion, because in the classroom, in public school classroom, you get a lot of that
Yeah,
discussion. I mean, that's when I think about the teachers that I enjoyed the most in high school, it was the teachers who led great discussions.
yep,
And so
absolutely.
why should that be any different in our homeschool, right? I mean, I don't know about
Exactly.
your guys' kid was, but mine are happy to chat all day long, all day long. And so
Sometimes it's to avoid other things, but not always.
and so from that, you can really get a good assessment about what they know. Now, for recording scores and such, I do a lot of, like, for short writings, 5 out of 5 if it's well done, 4 out of 5 if it looks like you put most effort into it, but you could have done a little more. 3 out of 5 if you just barely, you met the requirement and that was it. And so I'll give those scores type of thing. Discussion, I just allow, I set aside a certain number of points and just give them the full amount because frankly, I think it's worth it. Definitely, I include effort in our grading because I don't care if you're getting an A, if you're really not putting much effort into it and you're just doing what you have to do to get by. Like, that's not what I want to reward. I want to reward that effort.
Work ethic, right?
Yes. So those are some of the things that I've done to approach one that's not a lot of textbook tests, etc. But Heather, I'd love for you to talk about projects and how you do assessments and that kind of stuff.
Really
Leslie.
Yes.
Before I go on, Leslie, one thing I think would be great with the world history or military history is something like a timeline, digital timeline or something that your son can create.
Even an annotated one where they can,
yes,
little notes about people or events.
Those kind of things would be great. But Heather, I would love, you've come up with some great projects.
Yeah, one of the things we do is instead of just narration, at least based on my understanding of narration from what I've read, we do a lot of discussion with questions. Now they could, and I always say, like in my curriculum, use it how it works with your kid. If you have a kid who does best communicating in written form, have them write out their answers. If you have a kid who does best communicating in verbal form, talk through the answers. It's okay. And they get same thing with points, right? Like each question is worth 2 points. If you either didn't bother to answer at all, or what you gave was so off the wall and off topic, that's nothing. You get 0 points. Sorry. If you attempted an answer and it actually relates to the question, but you didn't really back it up with anything, you get 1 point. To get 2 points out of the 2 points, you have to not only answer the question, but you have to explain your reasoning. You have to be able to defend your answer, because I found both in life now and in the classroom, when I was a classroom teacher, it's a skill that a lot of young people and now a lot of adults lack, is being able to back up their opinions with a reason, not, well, just because I don't. You have to be able to explain why. Like you said, what is the reason? If you're going to say, well, you hated it, well, why did you hate it? Not your emotions because it was boring, but what was it that didn't do that? Why did, and there's lots of, why do you think this character did this? How do you think this affected this character? How would you have felt if you were that character?
Yeah.
Because it's getting them to perfect putting themselves in someone else's shoes.
Yeah. Even the boring. What do you mean by boring?
Yeah. What do you mean? Was it just you didn't like the topic to begin with? Do you think that the presenter just had a totally monotone voice and so it was
you
hard
already know it? What's...
Yeah, you already knew this information. What is your... That's not a good enough answer, right?
Boring is a lazy answer.
Tell me why.
Boring is a lazy answer.
It is.
Great is a...
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I was like, nope, sorry, elaborate.
Those kind of things.
You have to back it up. And that's one of the big things we work on, is you have to be able to back up whatever you're saying with a reason why. What is your reason why? But like you said, we do a lot of project-based learning for us. I'm a huge, huge proponent. And I know you talked about, you might throw some links in there, but I wrote a couple articles about why I love project-based learning so much. And one of the big reasons is it's a life skill, because what do we do for work one day? Whether you are working in a factory, you are doing a project to create an item. Whether you are an accountant, you are doing a project to manage someone's fiscal whatever. I don't know. My dad was an accountant. He's probably getting humiliated that I couldn't get any more specific than that. But if you are, a writer, you are working on a project to create a written document. Whatever it is, you are doing something that is a project. You are probably not, on the other hand, being assessed in your job by sitting down with a Scantron paper and a number 2 pencil and filling in the bubbles. That is just not how anybody is assessed in their job. I can't think of, there are some times where you have to take a test to enter the field, but other than that, nobody's assessed on their, in their annual, performance review by sitting down with a Scantron and a number 2 pencil. It just doesn't happen.
and to see if you can make it inside the bubble or if you go
Perfectly.
outside.
Did you fill it in properly? Did you do it dark enough?
Yeah.
So, and it really prepares them for real life, and it helps them to find that passion and really delve into it so that they can improve those skills so that they can apply it to a job and a career path, whether it's a trade, a law degree, a medical thing, whatever it is, they're going to produce something either mentally or physically at some point in their lives for their work. And so they need to get in the habit of that, not in the habit of taking a bunch of tests that will not apply to their later lives. And so they get to explore these things. Like in the history one I'm doing, they have to do something on art for every era we study. But I remind them that art doesn't have to be paintings. It can be the poetry, the music, it can be architecture, it can be political cartoons, it can be food and menus. All of these things are art because they can get in such a narrow focus of thinking art is just painting and sculpting and drawing.
Yeah.
And helping them sort of push that out and see the other ways. We get to see what they've learned. My daughter built a miniature of a home. Actually, let me grab it. I have it sitting right here because I'm going to be taking it with me to a conference next month. She built, for one of her art projects for history, she built a model of a home from the 1600s. Even with down to doing what looks like a thatched roof, she had to learn about what are the kinds of materials they would usually use in that era, and what did their homes look like, and why did they have certain things. And so I was able to assess how much she had learned about that era by looking at this thing she had created. Because she was like, oh, I have to make the roof look kind of crumpled because it's going to look more thatched. And so then she was able to say, oh, well, why does it need to look thatched? Oh, well, they didn't use roof tiles back then.
Yeah.
In this part of Europe, they would have used thatching for their roofs. And then talking about how in some parts of our former host daughter lives in Germany, and her family lives in a village in Germany where most of the homes still have thatched roofs. They are required to maintain that cultural piece by still having thatched roofs on their homes in their villages. What does that mean to today? Oh, they can't do fireworks to celebrate things because they all have thatched roofs, and that's a big old fire risk.
Yeah.
So that historical piece still impacts them today. Whereas somebody who didn't know that would be like, why can't you guys do fireworks? Everybody else in Germany can.
Yeah.
So to see what they're learning, but explain it to you or to somebody me. And it doesn't have to be a formal presentation. It can be sitting around the dinner table and talking about what you made.
Yeah.
But you get to assess what they've learned, and if they are if they've genuinely applied themselves, as you said, or if they've tried to take the shortcut method and you ask a probing question and they have zero idea how to answer it. You know how much work went into their project.
Yes. Well, and so yes, you could do, there are other projects, like if you are not a big project family, and I admittedly am not a big project person with the hands-on type of projects, but there are, like I said, things like digital timelines.
Yeah.
PowerPoint presentations, a year-long type of project, making videos out of like photos that they find online and creating the script.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't have to be
go with it.
Arts and crafts.
Those are right. That's what I mean. Arts and crafty. I'm not a big crafting kind of person.
No, in science we've done pet problems. So somebody's writing to her like an advice column, asking for advice on how to handle different problems with their pets. And she has to be able to include 2 sources she's used. That's also given her the experience of learning how to assess the worthiness of a source, which is such an important skill for them to have. How do they learn? One of the books we initially picked out for science, she and I both go through it, and we kind of both came to each other on the same day and said, something in my gut says no on this book.
Yeah.
She's learning to evaluate a source, and when something's saying, I don't know if I can trust this source, that's an important life skill.
Yeah.
If there's ever an important life skill, that's certainly learning to judge the value of a source is vital.
Yeah. Something that else I just thought of that's not textbook, but kind of a supplement that I wanted to throw out there. I know we're kind of past that, but I was thinking about it specifically with Leslie. There is a Twitter feed that does World War II as if it's happening now,
Oh,
meaning like they report all the events that are happening.
that would be interesting.
So,
And that as a project would be great.
something like that as a project would be so interesting to have your kiddo do that. Something that we have done is I found, you can Google for this. That's how I found it. It was like I forget what it's called, like a Facebook profile template. So we uploaded it to Google Sheet or Google Slides, and then my kids have created Facebook profiles for various historical
Oh, that would
characters
be fascinating.
or events. They did they did some with they did a series with dinosaurs, and so like they were different kind of dinosaurs in that, and so but then they would talk about like as their posts like different events that happened.
Eat a Triceratops today.
Right, like these kind of things. And so when you think about that from historical events,
Yeah.
the like I said, the Twitter feed that does history, World War II as it's happening, and I think this is like the third time they've been through it. Like they go the entire length of the war and then
And then start
start
again.
it back over.
I'll have to check that one out because that's just fascinating to
It
me.
is
I'm a history
so,
nerd, so that's really
yeah,
cool to me.
it's
And
one of
World
my
War II is one of
favorite.
different
It's
eras.
one of my favorite feeds, and I've learned so much about
Yeah.
things that are events that were important to the people involved, but not important enough to make the textbooks.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much.
So much. And so that those kind of things are other ideas of how we can think beyond the scantrons and the textbooks.
Yeah. Oh, we're doing something similar with history this year where she has to do a time traveler journal. And she has to pick 3 events. It can be any 3 events that happened in that time period. I was like, I'll give you some ideas, but I don't care if it's a massive event or a minor event. I don't care where it happened in the world. All it has to do have happened during that time period. And you have to go and pretend like you have traveled back in time to that event and you are watching everybody witness it. What are the people around you feeling? How are they acting? Are they like freaking out? Are they excited? Like you need to explain what you're seeing as like an eyewitness to this
Yeah.
event.
Yeah, I mean, those kind of things, those are the ways that we know how much our kids are really learning. Like, they didn't memorize some facts to answer the test that they're going
And
to
then
forget,
forgot 2 days later.
right? Like, we all know those kids, and some of us probably were ourselves who did that. Like, that's how we got through school.
That was me.
But taking that knowledge of creating a Twitter feed of,
Yeah.
a week span of time in over a historical event, they're going to remember
That's
that.
genius, by the way. I mean, that is amazing.
It is. The creating that Facebook profile of
I love
some
it.
historical person, they're going to have to think about how that person spoke, the events that weren't very important that we all post about on Facebook, but also the events that are big and important to us. And, you'll have those posts where you said, you remember last week when I said such and such? Well, now this is why.
Right?
So how do you do that in a historical context? Like,
We
remember
only got
last
to
week
learn
when that submarine snuck up on our coastline? Well, guess what? Like those kind of things.
my daughter got to learn to create a product landing page in science. As interesting as that sounds, she wanted to, we were talking about pet behavior and how to handle pets were having, maybe a cat was having a little bit of behavior problem in this particular pet biology thing. And she designed a jungle gym for cats as a product to help because she had read how often these behavior problems are because cats are not being enriched enough.
Yeah.
And so they need something that is going to help connect them to those natural instincts of chasing and climbing and all of that. So she created it. And I said, well, hey, babe, just creating a product isn't enough. like if you're going to make it, you're going to need to sell it, right? Not that she literally has to,
Yeah.
but what would you do if you were trying to sell it? You would make
Hmm.
a sales page for your
Yeah.
product. And so I popped her onto, we in the blogging world know this, but there's a website called canva.com.
Yeah.
And there are all kinds of free templates for just about
Mhm.
everything you could literally possibly
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah.
And one of them is a sales page. And so she went in there and figured out how to piece together a sales page and all of this stuff. And what would the info be that would draw
Mhm.
people in and entice them to buy a product? That's understanding biology and what it applies to cats. And it's understanding economics. And it's
Yeah.
understanding the psychology of sales and
Yes.
all of
Yeah.
this all in one thing.
Yeah. Right? Um, I remember in school when we did, I don't remember what, but we did newscasts
Yeah.
of talking about this. So have your kiddo report the news. Like
Mock
there are
trials.
so
Mock
many
trials are
ways.
great.
Yeah. Like so many ways that we can make it interesting. And some of them are going to be more involved. Building a house model, that's an involved project. Filling out a Facebook profile, that's much simpler. So there are ways, whether you want to something that's a 10-minute assessment or a week-long
Right.
assessment. There
And
are so
based
many
on what
ways.
is your kid's kinda natural
Yes.
bent, are they into arts and crafts? Like, my daughter picked that because she loves doing those things. She's
Yeah.
very artsy craftsy, so
Yeah.
that's her thing. My next child, when he gets to that, there's 0 chance he's gonna do something like that. He could build stuff out of Legos if I let him, or in Minecraft. And you know what? If he builds it in Minecraft, what's it to me? If he shows me that he learned
Yeah.
it and that makes him happy, if he can still prove to me what he
Yeah.
learned with that build in Minecraft, then build it in Minecraft. There's no rules, people. There's no
My
rules.
boys did a out school class that was world architecture in Minecraft, and they had to
Oh,
build
awesome.
copies of different different
Yeah,
pieces of architecture. Again, you've got the skills of art of whatever type, but also those computer skills. If they're into
no
the
mess to clean up.
no mess to clean up, something that they
Good,
are
good.
enjoying. Like there's no rules other
It
than
doesn't
whatever
have
your
to make the
state
most.
laws are
Mhm.
about what it needs to be. And again, I your kiddo can still go to college and still do those boring textbook stuff and excel, even if
Yeah,
that's not what they had to do before. And part of that, I think, comes from that, at least for some kiddos, it's going to be personality dependent, but you're teaching them to, one, know how they work so that they can adapt
yeah.
in high school or in college, but also just like that enjoyment of learning, that subject, like
That passion.
that, and yeah, like my one of the things, I said that my son likes to chat about what he's learned and reading, and my daughter would do it too. In college, she would often call me and say, I thought you would like to know about this. I thought you would find it interesting. I found this interesting. You know how much that like warmed my heart to know that like
Right? That's
even
awesome.
when she's
That's what
doing
we all
subjects
hope
that she
for.
right, like we want kids we want our kids to whatever they're doing, we want them to be able to enjoy it in whatever that looks like for them. And and right, because like I mean I don't enjoy Star Wars, but I love that my family does. Like
Yeah.
my boys, and I love watching them enjoy it. I love watching people enjoy whatever they enjoy. And to help our kids to create that enjoyment of, even if it's mopping, how can they enjoy it a little bit more, right? Even if it's writing, or even if whatever it is that doesn't excite them, how can they enjoy it?
Yeah.
How can they make it work better for them?
Yeah.
And where can we help them find the things they really do like?
Yeah.
Because as adults, yes, we all have the things we don't enjoy doing, but mostly we gravitate towards those things we do.
Yeah. We
And
find somebody else to take over often we find somebody else to take over things we don't like. I don't
right.
like the dishes. Guess what? We made a deal with my husband a long time ago. He takes care of the dishes because I hate it and I do most of the cooking, and that's how we balance things. And that's okay. Right?
Yeah.
Like they learn. And I think as you were talking about, I was thinking another thing that helps them when they get to college is that they have learned to analyze sources really well.
Mm-hmm.
Because they haven't just been handed a textbook and said, this is all the information you need,
Yes.
and it's all accurate, ta-da, because it's in a textbook. They've
Yeah.
had to learn to find resources for projects. They've
Mm-hmm.
had to learn to figure out which resources are good and which resources are iffy. And I talk about this a lot when I was teaching in the classroom, and I talk about it to my kids a lot right now.
Yeah.
Wikipedia is not a good source for you to use, other than to guide you to other sources.
Yes.
How do you figure out what's trustworthy and what's not? How do you
Mm-hmm.
pull information from sources and put it together into something else, which they're going to
Yeah.
have to do a lot of in college?
Yeah.
That prepares them for that in that way. In fact, in
Yeah.
college, even more than high school, they tend to get more projects and papers rather than tests in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
their classes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Heather, this has been absolutely fantastic. And I hope those of you who are watching have been inspired to think beyond what those textbooks and think about what else you can do, whether it's encouraging them in the areas they already do like or helping them to find ways to kind of like the things that they don't really enjoy. And if you have favorite resources or such that do this high schooling without or beyond the textbooks, I'd love for you guys to share them down below. I'm going to leave several links to some resources about project-based learning from Heather, and I've got a few links, including a World War II link that has the Twitter feed on it down. I'll leave it all down there, and my flip through of Heather's project-based geography, which again, adapt it however you want to. We didn't do a lot of projects. The projects we did were mostly the cooking. And I mean, cooking. And so take a look at it and be inspired to create the high school that works for your family and for your kiddos. So thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to Heather for coming on and sharing her love of this as well. So thank you.